just wanted to get you on and take a coach who's basically grown up in St. Louis, played in the St. Louis baseball scene. This is Baseball 101. Let's break it down to the bare bones. We have right-handed pitching phenom Nick Boughton here. Welcome in, everyone. This is Baseball 101, powered by Youth Baseball Midwest. I am your host, Dave Wiggins. Today we've got a special guest on the show. Pretty exciting show for y'all. Chad Gendron. Chad is the lead pitching instructor at Practice Factory down in South County in St. Louis County. He is also a youth baseball coach, and he's got a pretty extensive and impressive baseball resume playing in and coaching wise, and wanted to bring him on the show and kind of to introduce himself to the youth baseball, I guess, arena here in St. Louis, and also get some thoughts and knowledge from him on what he's seeing in youth baseball nowadays, and also kind of picking his brain on training tactics he's using when he's working with young kids and developing young throwers and young pitchers. Anywhere from an 8-year-old all the way up to a college age or even a professional. Chad, how you doing today?
Doing great, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing real well. You're not too far from me. You're
right on the other side of the wall.
Right? Chad, wanted to just kind of start off the show. Tell us about your experience as a young guy growing up in St. Louis, playing youth baseball, eventually high school, club, into college, into pro ball. Just kind of give us a little bit of a background there.
So, like most people, like most kids out here, my parents didn't come from a baseball background. So I didn't really get exposed to high levels of baseball growing up. I played for a lot of not club teams, but house teams coming up. I didn't really get known to what I could do with a baseball until someone kind of told me later on, so the training aspect wasn't really there for me like we have experienced today. But as I started progressing, going through, I got in contact with people like you guys that, kind of showed me the way. And, through middle school, through high school, I was able to progress myself and get actually the arm strength that I needed to stay healthier through those seasons. Other than that, though, I was very lost with most of this, like most people. I didn't really get to learning until I got to college, and unfortunately I had my first elbow surgery. So, I am set back a year, but I had to learn how to still progress, still play baseball, still get through this. And then eventually, once again, had my shoulder surgery, so I had to do it again. But, at the same time, didn't get set back, had to take it as a learning experience and keep getting better through baseball somehow. So mentally, I progressed a lot through the game during those times, even though I couldn't physically throw a baseball. Looking back at it now, wish I would have done a little bit more of that as I was younger, but trying to, become the coach now that I needed back then, so trying to show these kids the right way to do things now, being through, college ball, pro ball, being able to show these kids that this is what it takes to get to that level that you dream about. Right. While also trying to keep them as healthy as we can in the process.
Yeah, and I'm sure you look at your playing career and you kind of look back and think, man, if I had a coach like me, Chad.
Exactly.
I wonder how far I really could have gone in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that a little bit. I mean, for context, how old are you? 32?
I just turned 33 last month. Yeah.
You just turned 33 last month.
Mm-hmm.
If Chad got a wild hair, he would walk over to our mound right now, do a couple warm-up throws, and he could still huck a baseball 92, 93 miles an hour. And Chad, what are you, 5'10" on a good day?
If I stand really tall, yeah.
5'9", 180, 190 pounds, throwing in the low 90s as a 30-year-old. Obviously, you're an elite mover. The way that you sequence when you're throwing is, high level. I remember when you were coming up as a player, we would use your videos of you throwing to show to kids on, hey, this is what it needs to look like. And just, you're a testament to you don't have to be massive. You don't have to be 6'6". You don't have to weigh 210 pounds to to throw a baseball really fast. You just need to move
Hmm.
really, really well.
Yeah.
And talking about that when you're training young arms, middle school, high school, I don't care the age. When you're training someone how to throw a baseball, where do you start?
So I like to start with at least trying to get the arm in the correct position to apply power. Because if that's not ready, we're going to get hurt, right? So, I like to start essentially with throwing arm. If that's in the right spot, we can start moving to the lower half. We can start then bringing the power up through the chain. As long as this is in the right spot to be able to move the baseball efficiently and not get anybody hurt, we're good to go. But until this is ready and we feel that this is strong enough to support the movements that we need, it's a low throwing, low intensity kind of day.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, back in the day, the Mark Pryors of the world, the high elbow, the inverted W guys, they threw extremely hard. This was kind of before we had high speed video, and we had essentially scientists working on how our baseball players move and helping them. But you think of like where the ball was at foot strike for a pitcher like Mark, or they'll talk about the flat arm. Kind of dive deeper into where is, in your opinion, or the where's the optimal spot for the arm to be at foot strike?
So optimal spot at foot strike is somewhere in between 90 and 90 here. So it doesn't have to be flat, doesn't need to be up top here. We're looking to be loose. We're looking to be somewhere inside of here that the elbow can still move and that we can still let this turn come through. If I get too high up inside of here, I start putting pressure on my arm, can't accelerate through. Right? If I get too low, this is where we start getting the elbow torque in and it starts turning underneath here, right? We're looking to have that humeral head somewhere even. And as long as this is somewhere inside of 90 and loose, we can get that turning coming through here.
And is that something when you see a young kid come in and that's kind of the first thing you see is the arm's either outside 90 or the arm is, the ball's pointing at the ground when they land, or the arm's up really, really early, right? They're taking
Mm-hmm.
it out early. They're showing it to the sky before the foot lands. Is that something that you'll see, more typically in a younger athlete or in a like
Well, we will see more of the up too high, up in too hard in that kind of 8 to 10 U athlete that's starting baseball, that's getting kind of the instruction, taught to them of getting the baseball up, where they just haven't quite made the correlation of it's up and loose and it doesn't have to be cranked into our head and then, touching our ear before we try and throw this baseball, right? That really our thing when we get kids that age is trying to get them to understand that the looser throw is the better throw. Right, they want to apply force. They want to get everything in tight, kind of push it through. And that's where we start getting elbow problems from this and that. So really, when they start coming in, the first thing we try and go for those kids that usually in that age range is when we start seeing that 8 to 10 U, right, where like I said, they're starting to figure out where the baseball needs to be in space. To them, tighter is better, and they get it cranked in, and they start putting a lot of tension on the elbow and through the arm there. A lot of those kids, it's kind of just letting them feel that the arm's, just a noodle, kind of just sitting there working through, right?
Absolutely. Something I think you and the staff at our elite pitching development program do, and something I've been big on for a while now, is trying to get them to understand that it's more of the trunk, the core, the center of their bodies throwing the baseball. The arm is just delivering the ball. Um, and I feel like the more focus that the thrower has on where their arm is and when it's up or how to get it up, I feel like the less likely they are to be able to sequence and time up with their trunk rotation. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
when you're able to focus on the middle and you can really get them to understand what it's like to move through the middle, it almost instantly kind of gets the arm where it needs to be. Have you kind of seen the same thing when you're working with kids?
Yeah. So that's a lot of the basis of what we do here in APD, right? So it's not a lot of throwing work that we do in here. It's more movement based work. We're trying to get the kids to figure out how to move fast, how to move with their body fast through the zone and accelerate the arm with their body, not trying to push the ball through the zone. right? So we're trying to get these kids, it's like you said, to understand the sequence of everything, right? That as the legs turn and everything pushes, now our hips have to fire, now upper trunk fires, now everything goes through, and understanding that the arm really does nothing. The arm is going to follow along and get into slot as it needs to coming through. The body's going to do all the work, right? Which is why we use the tidal tanks as much as we do. We do a bunch of med ball throws in here. The med ball really for us, throwing that, yes, it's a little bit higher intensity. However, getting that throw down and being able to pull through does tell this arm how to move through space, right? It also tells the trunk how to pull this ball through rather than that push through the zone that we see in the backside there, right? The last couple of years that you've seen here, we've started migrating more into the tidal tank era. So, I'm a big proponent of water bags and what it does for kids. Being able to see, feel, hear the water move behind you is huge for those guys, especially the younger guys. It's easier to tell a kid, hey, make it loud. Move fast, make something loud, rather than, hey, get in your backside, try and take your chest, turn it through, come all the way over the top. No. Make it loud, see what happens. And those kids start smashing that bag through, and whoa, look at that. You can throw 70 today. Like that. It's kind of the progression of things, right? It's putting it more into perspective rather than a throw, right? We all can
Yeah.
make these motions. We all can do this, but how in your mind can you correlate that into a smash?
Yeah, the get off the lawn coach on X sees the water bag work and they instantly want to call it out. Well, that's why are we doing this? Why don't we just grab a baseball and throw it, right? We don't use water bags in our sport. We throw a baseball. Why are we throwing paddle balls? We throw a baseball. And it's trying to get people to understand that we can use different implements to help kind of influence certain movements. And my challenge, and I've even tweeted this at Jeff Fry before when he's talking trash on pull downs and shuffle throws, saying that you're never going to have to make that throw in a game. I asked him if he's ever used a tee to train a hitter, and unfortunately, he's never responded to me. I was kind of waiting for him to. I was waiting for him to say, "Yeah, I love the tee. The tee's great." It's like, well, hey Jeff, you don't use a tee in a game, so why are you use it in training, right? And it's just like
Right.
that thought process is broken. You, we're
Right.
finding more and more innovative and more effective ways to train kids that don't involve throwing a baseball 365 days a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a good
100%.
idea to throw a baseball
Well,
365 days.
and it's giving us the ability to keep training, even though we threw yesterday, the day before, and our arm is sore, right? I have kids that come in every single day a week right now that get training in. Yeah, they don't throw max and 10 every day. Some of them throw 2 bullpens a week. Some of them are starters, throw one big bullpen a week. But their programs are stationed out to where they always have bag work. They're always getting something throwing wise in, right? They're always getting some kind of movement work. They're always getting some kind of work in to get their throwing motion cleaned up, right? Sure, we can work on arm strength. Sure, everything comes through, right? But at the same time, if I train their arm every day, we're A, going to get way too tired to do anything. B, probably going to get those kids hurt. But if I can alleviate a lot of the stress of that throwing inside bag work, inside med ball work, inside, our stretching routines here, then yeah, we can get way more work in every single week.
Without question. When you and I were younger, we really didn't have this style of training when it came to throwing or pitching training. We had the 20 to 40 minute individual pitching lesson where, you
You
come
showed
in,
up, played catch, and
yeah, you get on the mound with the next big leaguer, and he tells you everything you're doing wrong, and you're overcoached, and the only stimulus you have is that 5 ounce baseball in your hand. You probably throw 80 pitches, and you don't do any sort of a warm up or recovery, and you go home and you rinse, wash, repeat next week. So what do you, educate the parent of a 10-year-old who reaches out and says, I really want my son to take private pitching lessons. I just don't think the group setting is good enough for him. I really need the one-on-one focus. Why are facilities and why are programs getting away from this, and why are we going to a more, I guess you could call it, a more just overall overarching program versus that individual one-on-one lesson?
so for us, it develops a little bit of independence, right? So kids have to understand that they need to get their work in, right? Yes, we hold them accountable to everything. There's 3 coaches around here walking around helping everybody out, right? But at the same time, the water in those tanks is meant for them to figure out how to move, right? If I'm standing there over the top of them the whole time going, this has got to go there, this has got to go here, that kid will never correlate how that's supposed to move, right? But if I leave them alone for 5 or 10 minutes for 10 reps or so, all of a sudden, I come back and they're hammering it through. Well, why am I throwing differently? You've done it yourself, dude. Like half the time, it's letting the kids figure out how to do this. Like yes, we provide instruction. Yes, we help them out if things look very funky, right? But nobody throws the same, right? So how your body generates power is going to be different from my generating power from Connor's, from everybody else that's in here, right? But if that kid can figure out for himself in an instant how to move that water, that's all we're looking for. It's a movement pattern, right? It's a movement pattern. It's not about teaching kids what positions to be in. It's teaching them how to move. So, letting kids get a little bit more independence inside of here has actually gotten us better results with us walking around and helping multiple kids at once and letting kids figure out how to work out and how to be independent and, figure out the movement patterns. Feel how this is supposed to be without a coach barking down your neck every single time, right? Because, yes, it's going to feel weird. We're making different moves every single time. It's going to be different. But the more I can let them figure it out and guide them through this and just let them go and, provide feedback rather than super instruction of where they should be in space, we've had more kids figure out, how to move rather than how to be robots.
Without question. And I think that was the issue with the individual lesson is I think we were creating robots. We were creating what our eyes told us was the best way to move, and we were telling kids to try to move that way. And I even had this conversation with Nathan Yamnitz a couple weeks ago about we need to be aware of how our kids move. We need to be aware of are they able to do certain things, and that's why collaboration with strength coaches and PTs, if the kids are seeing them, can be so important for us because we could literally be asking a kid to get into external rotation of his back leg where like he might be more of an internal hip guy. We don't know that just by looking at them, right? We're baseball coaches. We may have
right.
but go into that a little bit, just kind of like the collaboration there.
And like our strength coaches are huge for us, right? Because we have, like we talk about, it's an explosive movement. We have to be able to go, right? But if you can't get enough rotation in your backside in order to rotate forward, you're always going to have a lack of power there, right? Being able to go over to Joe Lasky over here and tell him, hey, this is what my guy needs. I need him to get a little bit more external rotation, be able to hold this position while he turns through the zone. Joe's going to go over there, get him some overhead work in, get him some pull work in, and he's going to come back in a few weeks and be able to just juice that ball the way we need, right? Even if, take a guy like Jack, for instance, right? Jack Voorhees. We've got him in. We've got him doing so much core work with his hips, or so much core work, so much hip work right now to try and open him up to where he needs to be. And yeah, he's gone up 7 miles an hour this year. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not necessarily figuring out how to put them, like I said, put them in the position. Where does that guy need to be in space? It's his body, right? Jack's an internal rotator. Yeah, so we're going to let him rotate early, get on, get down, pull it through. He's not going to hold back like a lot of guys and pull down through. No, he needs to move fast and get down the mound. It's a whole different look at things that way, right? Like, and being able to go over to a strength coach and tell him like, hey, internally dominant, let's get some push work in. Let's let him, let's let the strength coach figure out how to get this guy stronger in these positions where I know now that's where he needs to be. It's not like I need to move his leg even more here, right? Even if his thought process is push his knee to second base, some guys aren't going to be able to do that physically. But if that knee is still in the ground and we're moving forward, that's kind of what we're going for, isn't
it? Without a doubt. I think of a conversation I had just a couple of days ago with Joe Lasky over at his facility right across the hall. He had one of my guys who's I've been throwing with for a while, and he's kind of a stiff mover. He has a hard time getting any sort of thoracic extension at all, right? It's hard to create separation, and we could do drill after drill after drill, and we could make it look good on the wall with a plyo ball in his hand, but when we get him on the mound, it kind of it doesn't translate. And Joe, he asked me, he said, does his trap really fire like big time when he's trying to go into flip up? And I said, I'm fairly certain it does. I could pull up a video. And he's like, dude, do a pull up real fast. And like he could tell by a kid doing a pull up and seeing his trap like tighten up as he's trying to do a pull up. He's like, I
Yeah,
guarantee when he's going into flip up, that trap is just absolutely on fire right there. And I pulled up a video, and sure enough, it's like as he's going to lift, it's boom, he's here. So it's like,
it's
what can I
inverted
do?
W up, like
I can't create the separation I need.
right. So
And
that's
it's
the
like,
pusher. You gotta
yeah, that's the
get that
picture.
around. Yeah,
100%, right? How am I going to generate laid
yeah,
back or external rotation if I can't, open that up? So it's like, hey, Joe, now
well,
now you're going to help me open this kid up. And he's like, absolutely.
exactly. He
That's
lets that movement up, and now we can start moving freely and letting it come through. Yeah,
right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's huge. Um, let's talk about. Say I have my son's 4, right? Do I like the way
Mhm.
he throws? Not really. But he's 4, so I can't
Right.
really be that critical, right? But when he gets to be 6 or 7, I'm gonna want him to have some basic fundamentals of
Mhm.
throwing. So say I bring and we're gonna go different levels here. Say I bring a 7-year-old to you, like, hey man,
Mhm.
this kid is he's gonna try to play 7 and under baseball. It's coach pitch or machine pitch, like, and you watch him throw, and it's a disaster. What are 3 things, 3 points of emphasis that mom and dad could do at home with the young man to help him instantly just start moving better?
To help him start moving. So, are you talking throwing drills, or are you talking
I'm talking
wanting
throwing
him to go?
drills.
Okay,
Yeah, this
okay,
is baseball
okay,
101. Let's break it down to the bare bones. Like
okay,
this kid needs to learn how to throw a ball.
okay. So, start from the basics here. I would probably have him get on 2 knees to start. Take the legs out of it, right? Take the legs out of it. Have him start throwing baseballs from there. He's going to have to learn how to generate some kind of power with his core here to propel that baseball, right? After that, keep the legs out of it still a little bit more. However, you're going to add the hips into it. So go and do a split stance. So front foot out, back foot back, right? So righty hitter or righty thrower would be left leg out, right foot back, right? What we would call a rocker throw, hands together, rock forward, rock back, have him create that same tension that he was feeling on that 2 knee throw, and then throw. After that, I would have him just go through a 1-step throw, make sure we're adding all 3 of those steps together, right? Because that way you're taking the hip, like I said, the hips and everything out of it. For that first one, he's learning how to rotate. The second one, we're adding just the legs into it a little bit. That third one, you're adding the step back into it. But where you are stepping is where that rocker throw should be happening, right? Which is the landing position. So just kind of building all the way through that, 3 little easy things to kind of just time everything up and let it kind of work together.
Awesome. uh, Please, guys, if you're listening and you have young throwers and you don't know what to do with them, or you think your kid throws funny, first watch yourself throw in the mirror. It's probably your fault. But, but after that, maybe consider those 3 drills, or even reaching out to Chad, and he can help you guys. Um, Say I've got a 12-year-old, and he
Mhm.
plays on a pretty good team. He My son throws a lot of strikes, but he just doesn't have the velocity. Can I get him on a velocity program like right now? Can we start really working on his velocity? Because if he wants to play 12U major baseball, he's got to throw 68 miles an hour. How do you how do you handle a conversation like that?
So I try to explain that velocity is a byproduct of what we do, right? So velocity programs, while they exist, yes, you can start throwing a lot more and harder just because you're throwing more and more recently, more effectively, right? But at the same time, if you're doing that, you're pushing your arm to limits, right? You're really starting to progress very fast if you're not doing the correct way, right? Um, I believe that what we do here is velocity is a byproduct of what we do, right? If I can make a kid understand how to move, where to be in space, and how to rotate efficiently, then his velocity will increase, right? Going back to what you said as well, getting in the weight room, right? That's one of the conversations we have to have as well. Is he strong enough to move the baseball at this velocity? If not, he's probably going to get hurt, right? So he's got to be able to move efficiently, be strong enough to move it, and then put it all together when it gets to the mound. It's a couple things that have to go together there. but at the same time, they play a huge role on each other there, right? Like I can teach a kid how to move as efficiently as possible. He can have the cleanest mechanics in the world, but if he doesn't have the power to put behind it, it really doesn't matter.
I remember a couple years back, you and I had a kid come in and he wanted to start an aggressive velocity program. And
Mm-hmm.
after a couple weeks, like we met with him and his dad and we said, stop spending your money here, go spend it at
Go
with a
to the weight
strength coach. Like
room.
you can't do what we're wanting you to do right now because you're
Mm-hmm.
not physically there. And I can think of we get a bad rap sometimes about being money grabs and club baseball this and private trainers that. We literally turned the kid away and said, we don't want your money. Like, we want you to move better. We want you to be stronger. We want you to be ready to do what we want you to do. What was he, a sophomore in high school? I mean, he wanted to
Yeah.
throw harder. It's not like he was a 12-year-old. If he was 12, we probably would have told him, let's just do some normal strength stuff here in our program. But I mean, when
Right.
you're in high school and you want to make a varsity team or a junior varsity team as a freshman or
Mm-hmm.
sophomore, and you want to build velocity, we might not be the best fit right away. A
Right.
velocity program might not be what's best for your child. The weight room, learning how to move in the
The
weight
weight
room,
room.
getting with someone who
Correct.
understands
Well,
how the body works could
and
be
if
the
you're figuring out and if you're figuring out how to move in the weight room, we've seen that movement pattern clean up things over here just because they can understand, like I said, how to move their body in space. Like
right.
you understand where things are. You understand how this muscle contracts now. You understand how to actually control it rather than just, you know, car, car lot, flappy guy, right? So like
Wacky getting the incredible flat arm too, man.
wacky, wavy tube man, like, but having those two coincide together, like it has to be together, which is why, when we get kids 12, 13 years old inside of here, we send them over to Joe. Like the weight room is not somewhere to be afraid of if you have someone guiding you through it the right way, right? It's actually a huge tool for you if you even have any aspirations of being a high level high school, if not college baseball player, right? Very few of us are gifted to be able to just wake up and throw 90, right? Um, but at the same
Sure.
time, I but at the same time, I could, teach a kid to throw 90 if he throws 78 to 80 right now. You know what I mean? I can teach a kid to throw 95 if he throws 90 right now, if he goes and finds the weight room and gets bigger and stronger, right? Some kids are blessed to move that fast. Heck yeah, they are, right? God given. But at the same time, that is the biggest key I think that is missed out on in youth baseball right now is even just a small training program at home. Have your kids doing air squats, having your kids doing push-ups, doing some kind of arm care at home to just keep things progressing. That's the biggest thing missed out on right now. 12, 13, 14 years old. If you're getting to 15, 16 years old and you haven't hit the weight room yet, you're very far behind.
Could not agree more. I used the Super 60 for an example for my 13U team a couple weeks ago. That's the peak performance of the high school athlete right there. Those are some of the best high school seniors in America. And the physicality alone, guys hitting balls 108 to 110 with wood bats, a young man throwing a ball 100 miles an hour and running a 6'2", and then just looking at the pure size and physicality of these guys. It, man, I say
They
it
look like
all.
men. Like
Yeah,
they
they
look like
look like
men. Yes.
absolutely. The game becomes easier the more physical, the more athletic, the more explosive you are.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, 100%. 100%.
let's go. Okay, yep. And you have a couple of these guys, but you have a 14-year-old who can bring it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know who I'm talking about. But command can sometimes be an issue, right? He grew fast. He
Mm-hmm.
lost a lot of baby fat. He got tall and long, and his velocity ticked up big time. I mean, he's probably touching 83, 84 right now as an eighth grader. How do you get him? How do you turn that young thrower into a pitcher?
Over time. So he's been with me for 3 years now. Command isn't something that just happens for most kids. We have our exception, Corey Hilsinger. Like that guy will hit a fly where on a wall if you ask him to, right? But at the same time, for younger guys that have been blessed to throw hard, it's fun to throw hard. You can get it by people at a lot of ages, right? But at the same time, at some point, you've got to understand how to pitch, right? And Sawyer has had those couple years of, his rough turnings here and there. But at the same time, he's grown each of those years. He's figured out that if he puts it in the strike zone, people don't hit it. If he commands the strike zone, people don't hit him, right? He gets hit when he falls behind in the count and he has to lay a fastball in there. It's been the evolution of trying to teach him command stuff in here, just playing catch with his slider one day, right? Just playing catch with his changeup one day, trying to get a consistent release point behind every single one of them, then trying to take that to the game and making him throw it in game, right? It doesn't feel great the first couple times you throw it and you spike one, but the fifth one that you release well and it goes where you want it to and it spins right and the kid swings over the top of it, there's your confidence builder. Throw it again. And that's what we use fall ball for, right? We took tournaments off this year from fall ball so we could work on things like that, right? Sawyer went in there this off season and we wanted to work on his slider, right? That's why I brought that up. We wanted to work on his slider. That kid threw a limited amount of innings this off season, but we threw his slider a ton because we wanted him to throw it with kids in the box, right? You've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and throwing that pitch in game. Inside of the facility, it comes a lot of touch work. It's us going out to, long toss distances, getting out to 120 feet or so, having him throwing his changeup at max intent, right? Understanding that that's how it needs to come out of the arm, finding that release point after all this time, letting him figure out kind of how we were talking about earlier, letting him figure out without me standing behind him while he's throwing a bullpen, figuring out how to throw a strike. Let him throw to a target, right? Let him throw to a body and figure out how to release this baseball, right? That has helped way more than me just getting him on the mound, right? I've played more long toss sessions with that kid this offseason than he's gotten off the mound, 100%. And his command is shot through the roof. He's calling out his pitches now. He's being able to do that. He's being able to throw his changeup off the plate when he wants to. Like, that's going to be a special thing coming up soon.
That's awesome. How do you take a pitcher like Corey Hilsinger? How do you make him better? How do you help? I'm not going to say make him better. How do you help make him better? Because that kid. If those who don't know who we're talking about, I mean, the ace at Seckman High School as a freshman, logged over 50 innings, the elite command. He was 80-82 as a freshman. Not an above velocity guy, but didn't need velocity to beat guys. And now he's starting to tick into that 4 to 6 range. How do you just keep enforcing him to be who he is?
We let him kind of dictate what his command work needs to be for the day. He's got so much command that I don't need to teach him how to command the baseball. When he has his program set out for him, he knows when he has a bullpen. He knows when he has long toss days. He knows when he has, his high intensity days. His body's going to keep developing. He's one of those kids that found the weight room, where we were talking about, I can teach you how to move as clean as you want. That kid's mechanics are immaculate, right? But until he found that weight room, he was stuck in that 76, 77 mile an hour range. Like you said, last year he was 82, 83, right? This year he'll probably be 86, right? And he just keeps climbing, which, that's a testament to him getting in the weight room. But we let him dictate his command practice because he knows what he needs to work on. He's also very, 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 very smart, right? It's tough to teach that to a kid, and he's very meticulous at what he does. If he misses a curveball by 6 inches, he's upset with himself, and he throws another one, right? And it's tough to actually say that. Like you see him throw it, and it's a strike, and he's mad, and you're like, Corey, what's going on? Well, I wanted it off the plate, and then he throws another one, and it's 4 inches off the plate, and you're like, okay, go ahead, Corey, right? You got it. But that's what he needs to think about there. Like if he's working on, if something feels funny, yeah, we go ahead and talk about it. We get the command, we get the feel back down forward, we get the touch there. But, my process for him is keeping him moving as efficiently as possible, keeping him understanding how to move fast and getting down the mound. But, he's one of those kids where he's going to get bigger, stronger, and faster as he's in high school right now. My project for him is to not let him mess anything up. He's been gifted with this ability. My objective for him is to keep letting him build on his ability here. Let him move faster with the title tanks. Let him keep rotating. If he's having trouble or we're trying to juice a little bit more out of it, yeah, we'll take some video work. We'll see where he needs to rotate a little bit more here or there. But for the most part, he's a very well built pitcher, and if he wants to work on his changeup that day, I stand back behind him and let him work on his changeup that day. If something feels funny, like I said, I chime in. He turns back to me. We have a little conversation. But he is very meticulous at what he does. I don't touch him a whole lot of the times, man. I do his mechanical work. When he starts touching baseballs, that's Corey, man. That's all him, right? He's a different breed. Yeah, like he's a different breed, man.
Right?
100%. He's a kid that figured out what he needs and how he has been born to do this. I'll help him out with his mechanical work as much as he wants, but when he touches baseballs, man, that's all him. Like, he's blessed to do it, yeah, but he's going to be one to watch this year. If you guys, like Coach Dave said, if you don't know who that is, Corey Hilsinger is going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, he was last year.
Yeah.
Speaking of, like, when Corey touches a baseball, you're kind of hands off. I see more and more as guys are throwing their actual bullpens, less and less verbal coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and it's by design. And I think sometimes mom and dad can kind of sit there and wonder, why is no one talking to my kid while he's doing his bullpen? Um, can you explain the reasoning behind that and why we feel that's a more effective practice than standing there and giving him a bunch of information?
So a lot of that information comes from the work that happens prior, right? So, our title tank work, our med ball work, all the plyo work that comes with that, we're making adjustments the whole time he's in here before he even touches a baseball, right? So when he gets back on the mound, it's more or less his time to comprehend everything, try and get it to work. We obviously make, a little bit of adjustments. We chime in here and there if we've been working on things, just to kind of keep that ball rolling. But, like we were talking about earlier, they've got to figure this out and how to throw strikes, right? It doesn't happen with me trying to make a tweak every single pitch, right? He knows he threw the ball 10 feet over that way. He gets it. He's got to pull it downhill. I don't have to tell him that, right? But at the same time, like, parents don't try and, try and understand that we are trying to let your kids figure things out, right? It happens over a process. It may happen 10 pitches. It may be 3 bullpens later. But what we are trying to work on prior to them touching a baseball will eventually get to that baseball stage, right? When you touch the mound, it really shouldn't be mechanical work as it is. It should be trying to figure out how to throw strikes, right? And we've gone through this with some of our youth guys as well throughout the season. Prime example, Sawyer, we were just talking about him, right? How do you get him to throw strikes? Well, when he gets on the mound, don't let him think about mechanics. If he's thinking about where his glove is in space, he's not worried about the pitch at hand here, right? Compete when you're out on the mound. All of the mechanical work that we have worked on happened on that wall. It happened with the title tank. It happened with the title ball. When you get on the mound, let all of that figure itself out, build together, let yourself learn how to pitch.
Yeah, and I think when you say get on the mound, you mean get on the mound and throw to a catcher, right? Because I think making the main thing is, if you're focused on how you're moving, obviously you need to be focused on how you're moving on the mound, but your focus shouldn't be on how you're moving and trying to execute a pitch. So,
100%.
Before we get on the mound and we're throwing to catchers, we're throwing to hitters, mound work is more focused on what am I feeling, how am I doing, how am I moving on the mound. But that focus might be throwing a baseball into a net or blank space where you're not concerned about the result of the pitch, and you can be concerned about how you're moving. But the moment that catcher gets back there and you've got to execute pitches, the last thing on your mind should be, what is my glove arm doing? What's my hip doing? And we see it. Like, we've seen some really good pitchers over the years yip themselves up because they're so focused on how they're moving, and they're like, I can't throw a strike. Like, of course you can't. Your focus isn't throwing strikes.
Yeah, you're thinking about your eyelids right now. Like, what do you mean, man? So. Yeah, it's a tough process there because, like, yes, you want the mechanics to be right, and as a young kid, like, yeah, you're working on mechanics with coach in here. Like, you want them to be right. I get it. But when you touch the mound, it's time to compete. It's time to get down the mound and throw baseballs. So
Yep.
that's why we do shuffle throws before we even start throwing bullpens or anything like that. That way they can understand the movement pattern of moving fast, getting down the mound before we even touch the mound.
Huge fan of shuffle throws down the mound. It gets them to get the feeling of being downhill and having to match the slope, but it also makes them organize their body in space while moving faster than they're actually going to be moving when they're pitching. They've been a huge staple of the EPD throwing program for a while now, and I'm just seeing the improvements in command more so these last few years than I have, and it's because of how you're preparing these guys for when they do get on the slope.
Well, and even then, like we do throw breaking balls off of that. We throw changeups off that. Like it. Yes, we are throwing hard, but at the same time, that arm's moving just as fast as it would be, as you throw, pitches off the mound, right? Even if you're shuffling or trying to throw a long toss, you're putting that stress still on the arm. So what's the difference if I have you shuffle down the mound or if I have you throw to a target? Or if I have you play long toss, right? I would rather you get command work and training your arm to release the breaking ball as fast as possible and spin it as hard as you can and figuring that out without having to pitch and throw it as hard as you can and figure it out. It gives us an opportunity to have a kid throw 5 or 6 breaking balls in a row at high intensity without pitching. And they can understand how to release it, how to spin it, how to get through it, and then you start to understand the movement profile of it, and they can see it in space, and it's been very, very effective for us.
Well, and if you're helping them essentially be their own pitching coach, right, and you're not giving them every single cue when they go out to the mound in a game where there's way more stimuli than there are when they're inside in a facility. There's a whole lot more going on, and they lose control or they can't find their control if they're able to on their own get themselves back to the glove, get themselves back back locked in because they're learning how to do it in a training setting. Our goal as indoor baseball trainers is to get these kids ready to play a game of baseball, not to teach
Right.
them to throw 90. It's way more than that. It's like we've got to get you ready to pitch and compete and get guys out,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what your stuff is that day. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a big plus to the group style and the more hands off coaching strategy is to help them become more self reliant. I found myself the other day. There was a kid who missed, I think, 4 pitches up, 4 pitches, one up, next one was up, next one was up. I walked over and said, "Are you trying to throw strikes right now?" And of course, he said yes. Right. And if he's in a game and he's missing up, what's everybody yelling? Throw strikes, Timmy. Throw strikes.
Yeah.
It's like the
Strikes.
last thing that kid can do is try to throw a strike because he's
Right.
tried to throw strikes balls. It's like, so
Right.
instead of trying to throw a strike, try to throw a pitch below the strike zone. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
literally don't want you to throw a strike because your eyes and your body are not matching up right now. And
Right.
if they can learn that in a training setting, if they can remind themselves, if they go out and they throw the first 3 pitches in the dirt, they're like, oh, you know what, this next one, I'm just going to try to throw it over the catcher's head. Sometimes that's all it takes. And then they
And
slowly
that's it
get
is
dialed in.
100%. And we talk about that a lot with our younger guys is change the eyesight, right? What are we looking at? Where are we starting the pitch? I don't know. I'm trying to get it there though. Okay, so I understand you're trying to get your changeup down and in, but you don't know where it's going. So we need to pick a starting spot here, So figuring out, like you said, just trying to get dialed in with that, right? Trying to figure out where in space this is at, let it go through there, and let him figure out how to actually release this ball on his own, like that.
Yeah, final question. We'll keep moving up the
Hmm.
ranks. You have a high school senior like Landon Matthews, right? Who's
Hmm.
been one of the better pitchers in the St. Louis area through his high school career. He's got to go compete for a rotation or a bullpen spot at Maryville University next fall, and that's a tall task. Um, how do you get him ready to have a great senior year, and B, how are you preparing him for that next level?
So Lando's been on an on ramp for 2 months, a month and a half now, something like that. We've been getting these guys ready for a few weeks now. We've got roughly 4 weeks until season. Is that right? Something like that. So
Yeah,
we've got About
Yeah.
3 weeks. Yeah. So, we've got a couple bullpens left for these guys before they go back. He's been on a slow on ramp from beginning part of December. So, we've had him going through flat grounds. We've had him going through blend pens. We've had him going through compression throws before any of that. We've had him going through now his bullpen phase where I'm getting him conditioned to be a starter this year, right? So, his bullpen started out 15 pitches, right? Trying to get the arm used to moving down the mound again. Bumped him up to 30 pitches. Now we're into our sets phase. So he's got two separate sets of 20 pitches. So we're trying to get him to at least 40 pitches before he goes back, right? So we're going to have a couple weeks of blending him in there. He's got live, I believe, this week with Lafayette out there. So, he's going to tell his coach that, I'm good for 2 innings. He's going to break this up just to try and get his body ready to throw an inning, sit down for a little while, warm back up, come back into this game. We see a lot with our guys that get unprepared by this because, when they're going to see their pitching coaches or, their coach for the winter has just conditioned them to throw a bullpen to their catcher and it's 35 pitches. Well, in reality, if you threw 35 pitches straight in the game, that game's probably not going well. So, we're So, we're trying to get this more realistic here where Lando's going to throw 15 pitches. He's going to sit down for a little bit. He's going to throw another 20 pitches. He's going to sit down again. He's going to throw another 10 pitches. I want his body to start figuring out how to do all of this before he gets to season. That's the big key for us right now. Like his arm and everything we have fixed up throughout the off season. Once January hits, it's ramp up time for these guys. I'm trying to get them ready to get on the mound. Depending if they're a starter or reliever, it kind of depends on their schedule here. But at the same time, like these guys are getting ready to get out on the mound, not just throw bullpens, right? So I have to condition them in order to be able to get out on the mound and compete in games like you were talking about. It's not just getting in here and throwing a bullpen, sweet. Like, no, how are we training these guys to get out there and be competitive out there, right? If he's already done this, or if he's already thrown, say, 4 bullpens at, multiple inning slots, he's already starting to get conditioned. His body's already ready for this. If he needs to go to 4 innings, he's fine, right? This is nothing out of the ordinary. Most of the time when you get to spring ball, 4 innings for a starter, man, they're starting to get a little winded, starting to get to that, 60 pitch mark. Like you probably know with a couple of your guys, right? You start to get those first couple of weeks, 60 pitches is starting to be, a little taxing on them. Where in reality, if I can get him up to 50 pitches and simulating 3 innings already, he can go another 15, he can go another 20, you know what I'm saying? And not be so taxed the next day. That being said, his arm is also in condition to do that. He's also done plenty of work inside of here, post-workouts, pre-workouts in order to be able to put his arm through that stress already, right? If his arm wasn't ready to do that, he wouldn't be throwing this many pitches already. Right. But through the off season, he's gotten his arm strong enough and in shape enough to be able to handle 50, 60 pitches already. Like if he needed to in game right now, I could run Lando out there for 50 and I'd feel fine with him coming back the next day. He's fine, but at the same time, does he recover very well? Like his arms would be pretty sore the next day. It's not ready for that. His body's going to be sore. It's not ready for that. Right. But, my goal is for these guys after they throw those 60 pitches to be able to come back the next day and go, I feel pretty good. Play some catch, get their body ready to go for the next time they come out, right? The unfortunate thing about it is there's not really a rest day during baseball season. You're always doing something, right? Whether that be trying to play light, if you're a starter, trying to play light toss that day after your start, you're just trying to get the arm moving again, right? We're not trying to play long toss the day after. Let the arm recover. If you're a reliever, though, I had this talk with Tanner Medina. He's probably going to be Oakville's, one of Oakville's relievers this year. Is being able to throw every single day. You throw a flat ground every single day, no matter if you pitch or not, because your arm has to be conditioned to be able to throw every single day. Right? If you're going to be a high leverage guy, if you're going to be a big time reliever, you've got to be able to throw every single day. How many times did Mariano Rivera throw on back-to-back days? That third day is your rest day. Right. So, you have to be prepared to throw every single day, whether that's throwing a flat ground, if you need to throw a 75% bullpen that day, if you need to throw whatever as a reliever, whatever you need to be able to throw the next day, that's got to be your schedule every single day.
That's great stuff. Folks, there's lots of really great pitching programs here in the St. Louis metro area. Chad Gendron runs a great one. It's called Elite Pitching Development here at Practice Factory. He may have a recruit's hat on. It's not just for recruits, kids. These guys work with any and all kids from different clubs, kids that aren't in clubs. They do not discriminate. They will, if you want to get better at throwing a baseball, they will help you.
Absolutely. If you're willing to learn, I'm more than willing to work with you. 100%.
Chad, I want to thank you for your time, your insight, and wish you the best as all your boys head on into the season.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me. It was a fun time. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, everyone. For Youth Baseball Midwest, this was Baseball 101. I'm your host, Dave Wiggins. We will see you next time.